Hi, glad you could join me. We're going to update the Chapter 2 Carpet Calculator program to make it include class methods as we explore learning about methods. The code is given to you directly in the book, so of course you could just use that to follow along. This video is just to help you a little bit more and help you find any sort of small errors you might be making, because this can be really hard to deal with when you're first beginning as a programmer. So on page 167, they start out this example. Remember, we did our comments a little bit different than they do in the book, but you should be able to identify your main method. And we always are looking for our main when we're coding C#. Now they've changed their class name to be class example with class methods. So I think what I'm going to do is copy my old program to a save place, and I'm not exactly sure. There's so many different ways I could take care of this, but let me show you first how to copy your program, your project folder. I know that my project was saved in my documents folder, and in my documents folder I have the Visual Studio 2015 folder, and that's created automatically when I install Visual Studio 2015, where the first time I open it as the user. And inside the Visual Studio folder, you should find a projects folder. Now, if that's where you've been saving your applications, you'll be able to find your app pretty easily. Mine was named Carpet Calculator Video. I find that folder, so I'm going to copy it and paste it. And now I have a backup of that project. Now you can rename it or whatever you want, put it on a flash drive, but the only way you can move things properly as Visual Studio projects is to move the whole folder. So please don't try moving individual files. As you become more experienced, you may be able to do things like that, but your project is contained within that entire folder. If I open it, remember I have my solution file, then I have my project folder, again named the same thing. So lots of different things inside of there that I need to keep track of. Now that I've made a backup copy of that, I'm going to go ahead and open the original project back up and change it up a little bit to make it into this project. So I'm going to open Visual Studio, and in Visual Studio I should find a link in my shortcuts to that application. Now realize if I would have moved that folder or renamed it instead of copying it, I would not be able to open it from this recent link, right? Because it would not be there anymore. But I did it, so I can open it. Now I want to change that class name, and remember when we created this application the first time, they had us change our program.cs file to be carpetcalculator.cs. And then I had to rename my project a little bit to be Carpet Calculator Video because I had already created a Carpet Calculator project. I'm going to go ahead and modify this one to be named the same as our book, which is Carpet Example with Class Methods. A long name. So I'm going to change this CS file's name to that. So I will go rename it, and it's going to be Carpet Example, with Class Methods. Hard to not make a typo, right? Now it should prompt me and say, do you want to rename everything in this project with references to that class name? And yes, I do. Again, I'm not sure what all is going on inside Visual Studio with this stuff, so now I have the new name. I'm going to go ahead and update my comments to say that this is the Carpet Cost Calculator with methods, and I'm going to update my purpose. This program will calculate, oops, look at that, I had a typo. This program will calculate the cost of different type of carpets using user-defined methods. All right, so now we're ready. I'm looking at the code again on page 168, and there's a few things that they want us to do. I think the first thing I'm going to do is create a method that doesn't require any parameters. So this is just a method that's going to do some sort of action for my carpet example program. Remember, my class is the object. My object in this case is my carpet calculator, or my carpet example with class methods. And the first action that my program is going to take is going to be to give instructions to the user on how to do things. So I'm going to create this method, and I could put it anywhere really in my code as long as it's within my class block, meaning within the curly braces that begin and end my entire class. But I'm going to go ahead and put it down below my main method. So I'm going to scroll down, find the closing curly bracket for my main method, and I'm going to go ahead and put a comment on that just to help myself, end of main method. I know now that that curly bracket is where that main method is ending. I'm going to go ahead and press enter to open up a new line, maybe a couple, and I'm going to copy this display instructions method out of my book. Now, whenever I declare a method, I'm going to start with the type of method, and in our case, we want it to be static. Then I have a return value. This method is not going to return anything to its caller. All it's going to do is display some instructions on the screen. So I can put the keyword void there. It's not returning any data type. Now I need to name my method, and my method here is going to be named display instructions. And when I have a method, I always have to put a pair of parentheses, opening and closing parentheses, after my method name, and that's where I would put data types that might be passed to my method if I had any. But I don't have any for this one. I don't have any variables or data being passed into this method, so I just need the open and closing parentheses to indicate to C#, yes, I've thought about it, but I don't really have anything to put here for you. Then I'm going to press enter and put in my opening and closing curly braces for my method. Now the braces indicate this is a block of code, and the block of code I'm going to type in is for this method called display instructions. Now I'm not actually using this method anywhere yet. We're going to see how to do that here in just a minute. But first, let's create our method and put in the code. So in my display instructions, I'm going to do a couple right line commands because I'm just going to display some things to the user. So first I'm going to display a message that says this program will, and I'm going to put a space. Now after the closing double quote, I'm going to put another space and a plus sign, and that tells C# that I've got more. I've got more here. I'm going to concatenate more string values into this message, and the book just wants to show you how I can do this, and I'm going to go ahead and tab over so that I've lined up under that first line, and the rest of my message is going to say determine how much, and then a space, and then again I'm going to go after my double quote and put a plus sign to say I've got more, and finally carpet to purchase, and then I want a period. Now all of these lines are going to print out on one line because I'm doing one right line command, and I could just have them all in a row, right in one set of single quotes. But doing it this way is exactly the same, and the book just wants to illustrate to you that it doesn't matter which way you do it. Either way is fine. So there's my first line of instructions. Now I'm going to do another right line command with no data to get a blank line. And next I'm going to do another right line, because remember this whole module, this method, is just about giving instructions to the user. Now this line is going to be saying you will be asked to space, and after the closing double quote plus sign, press enter, go down to the next line and continue on. Enter the size of, and then space, and then after the double quote, again a plus sign, And finally, oops, I got off, didn't I? Lastly, we want to add the room. So the user is going to see one message here that says you will be asked to enter the size of the room. Now, we have a little bit more. Oops, I shouldn't have put a period yet. I was getting carried away. So they do want a space after the word room in our book. One more right line. This time, we want the message and the price of the space and continuation with concatenation. Carpet. So we're going to add the price of the carpet in price per plus sign. We're doing the space at the beginning of the next line this time. Either way, notice that I have to put the space in there if I want it to show up in my message. If I don't put a space in, it's going to be all squished together because the computer is going to output exactly what I put in these string values. So I have to account for my spaces. Finally, I'm going to end with the yards. And I want one more right line. And again, this one's going to be blank. So here's what my user will see if I execute this display instructions method, which I am not doing yet. But they're going to see one line that says this program will determine how much carpet to purchase, a blank line, then a line that says you will be asked to enter the size of the room, and another line that says and the price of the carpet in price per square yards, and finally we'll end with another blank line. Now I want to document this method, and using the XML documentation code, the best thing to do is to do it after I've typed the name of the method. I did not need to type all this code, but I was kind of thinking about that, and so I didn't do my documentation, but I have to get that done. So at the beginning of my method definition, again, I'm going to do the 3 slashes, press enter, and it says right away that we have a method here that's got some documentation. Display instructions will inform the user of the program's requirements. Okay, so we've got a nice method here created. This is a method definition. It's a static method. It does not return a value, and it does not accept arguments and parameters. Now, let's see if we can call that method. We want to display these instructions pretty early on, right? So we're going to go up to our main method. Our main method, of course, is the method that's automatically run by the computer when we run our program. So it's really like our controlling method. So what we're in our main is where we had all of our declaration for constants, our variables, and all of our code where we process our data. Well, let's go ahead and put a comment or a line of code in here to display the instructions to our user. So I'm going to move in my code to right after the declaration of my double variables, right before this comment that says process our data. And I'm going to enter some new lines, and I'm going to put a comment in that says display user instructions. And then I'm going to put a call in for our method. And so all I have to do here to call it is put its name. And I have to put, again, the opening and closing parentheses to show that I don't need to pass anything to this method because, you know, sometimes I might. So now I've got this message in here, or this line of code that says execute the method called display instructions. So let's run our program. It was all working before. We should see the same output as we saw before, except we should see those instructions beforehand. I'm not sure what that is. I think it's because I did that copy command. I'm going to close or save all on my project. See if I can run it again. Okay, so notice I got that weird error message and I just saved my project and made sure that I didn't have it open someplace else, and then when I ran it again everything was fine. Now, here's our message. This program will determine how much carpet to purchase. You will be asked to enter the size of the room and the price of the carpet in price per square yard. And then we have our output that was already there before. So it looks awesome. I think we've implemented our first user-defined method, so congratulations, you did it. I'm going to press enter and continue back to my program. Now, the reason that we use methods is to make our programs more modular. Modular programming gives us more maintainable programs because we're keeping our chunks of code in logical places where they belong. We're logically organizing things so that we don't have to look in many, many different places to find something. Looking at our code for our program, we have some different discrete functions that we perform that we might want to move into modules just to keep things logically defined what's going on in our program. Now this is a really small program, so we can handle it. But if you notice, we have some things, some code that look very similar. Right here, these right line statements are almost exactly the same, where we're outputting the information for our carpet. Our total cost calculation is exactly the same. We've just changed the cost of the carpet for each of those calculations. That's duplicate code. Anytime we have duplicate code, that's causing overhead to run on the system, plus making our program less maintainable. So these are some of the things that we want to take into consideration as we look at our program. So I'm kind of looking at the sample in our book, thinking, what kind of method do we need to implement next? And in our book, they think that we should prompt the user for the size of the room. Oh, that would make our program much more usable, wouldn't it? Right now, we're just saying that our room is 12 feet 2 inches by 14 feet 7 inches, and we're not taking into consideration that rooms could be many different sizes. So let's implement a method to prompt the user for the size of the room. I'm going to move down in my code to past my display instructions method, and at the closing curly bracket for that method, I'm going to go ahead and put a comment and display instructions. And again, I could do that as I was creating the method, maybe to make things a little bit easier for me in the future. Now my new method is also going to be static, but this time it's going to return a value. The value it returns is going to be this size that the user types in, and I'm going to put that in a double. Now, I have to say those things when I declare my method, because I'm telling C# what kind of data is going to be returned from this method. This method is going to return some data that's of the data type double. Now, once I put that in, I can name my method. This one's going to be named GetToMention. Now, it's going to expect some data to be passed to it, and that's going to be in the form of a string. And we're going to call this data that gets sent to us side. So whatever gets sent to this method is going to be placed into the variable named side. We'll look at that a little bit more. Now we've got our opening and closing curly brackets for our method. And right now I'm getting an error saying that not all code paths return a value. I'm going to ignore that until I finish coding my method, and we should see that error go away. This is one of those things that Visual Studio is being very helpful to you, but sometimes it should just give you a second to get everything done. Now, in this method, we're going to declare some variables. These variables are only going to be available to this method. They're not going to be available to other methods in our program. That's why they're method variables. The first one's going to be a string called input value. When we declare variables within a method like this, they're called local variables because I can only access them locally within this method. I cannot access them in other methods in my project. Now I have a couple of integers. I have feet and inches. Now these variables are only going to be used by this method. That's why they're being defined locally. Now the first thing in my method, after I've got my variables defined, I'm going to prompt the user for a side. So we want to know which, are they measuring, length or width. So here's our message. We're going to prompt the user with a write command. And in that, we're going to say enter the, we're going to do a format here, just to supply a variable, in feet, colon, space. We're saying enter the side in feet, and that side word was passed to us. So it's going to say enter the length in feet. If the user passed us length, it's going to say enter the width in feet. If the user passed us the width value, we'll see that as we write it. This one is a little complicated, so stick with me because I think that it'll explain a lot to you. Now, next I want to read in what the user types, and I'm going to put whatever they type into my variable named input value. So I'm going to set that equal to whatever gets returned from the read line statement, which is reading my user's input. Place it in input value. Okay? So now I've read in what they say. Now we need to convert what they typed in to a number. Convert the user's input into an integer, because that way we can use it in a calculation. We can't use a string in a calculation. So whatever the user typed, I'm going to put into the variable feet, and I'm going to take, using the integer.parse method, on input value. So again, reading it backwards, I'm going to take the user's input value, parse it as an integer, and put it into the variable named feet. Now, I'm going to prompt them again for any int value. So our first message said enter the width in feet. Now we're going to prompt them again with a write, and this time we're going to say enter the, and again we're going to format that side string to display enter the side in inches. We're going to go ahead and read what the user typed. Again, we're going to put it into input value. This is our temporary holding space where we're going to keep what the user types in. Then we're going to take that again and convert the user's, input into an integer. This time, we're going to put it into inches. And there's our parse command. And finally, I'm going to go ahead and return to the calling module the final data. Return the user's input expressed in inches to the caller. So the way I do that is using the keyword return. That says leave this method and go back to wherever I was called and continue execution with the next line of code. So I'm going to return feet plus, now again I'm going to cast as a double the value of inches divided by 12. All right, that finishes this method. So let's take a look at it. We've called it GetToMention. We say it's expecting an argument of a string that's going to be the name of a side, like length or width. We declare some method variables, some local variables. Input value, feet and inches. We prompt the user for their first side. We read that into feet. We prompt the user for their inches on their side. We read that into inches, and finally we return the value in inches that we have received from our user. Okay, so we're ready. We've gotten our dimensions now in a more flexible method instead of just having them hard-coded in our program. So we need to change some other things in our main to actually use that now. We've created the method. Let's go ahead and use that. Let's put it to good purpose. So what I want to do is right after my display instructions, right here, I'm going to come change a few things, and I might need to change a little bit before that. So let's do it. After we display our instructions, we are going to use our GetToMention module. Now our GetToMention module returns a value. So we have to, in our C# code, as we call it, we're going to call GetToMention placing its return value into room length and room width, and passing the appropriate descriptive string. You'll see what I mean. Okay, so I'm going to put this in room length. It's going to be equal to, give me a call to GetToMention. You tell me what my room length is going to be. And I'm going to send you this string length so that those messages that are being displayed to the user say that word. Now, after I do this, my room length should be equal to whatever the user enters those dimensions in inches. Now I'm going to do the same thing to get room width. Notice how I have this call, and then in the parentheses I say, here's what I want to pass to that method. It's expecting a string, and the string I'm passing in the first place is length, in the second place is width. So we should have some information here coming back. Now I don't need to do this anymore. I don't need to do these calculations of inches per foot and for the width and the length, because my GetToMention module has taken care of that for me. So I'm going to delete these lines of code out, room length, room width, because now I'm getting them this way. Don't need it. Now, do I still need to calculate the square footage? I do, but they want me to ask the user for a price now instead of just having the price in our program. So let's save all. I'm going to run my program right now, and I'm going to try to put in some data. Let's see what we got. Ooh, now I've got my message instructions here, and it wants to know what's the length in feet. I'll do 12 for, oop, I gotta fix that a little bit, don't I? It doesn't look very good. It's got a missing a colon and a space. Enter the width in feet, 6, 7, looks good. It says I've got some prices there. So it's still doing my calculation because we hadn't changed anything to mess that up yet. We're still using the old prices we had in the program before. So everything's good there. But I need to fix that prompt a little bit because my inches right statement is not quite right. So let me go find that. That's in my method where I'm prompting the user for the dimensions. While I'm here, let's see, there it is, right there. I need a colon and a space. I'm going to go ahead and put a comment here that this is end GetDimension on my curly bracket. And I'm going to update my GetDimension module with some documentation. So I'm going to do / and enter. Now notice how by doing the XML documentation, the comments, when I did that / this time it says, hey, you've got a parameter named side, and it tells me that I've got some things going on here. So by doing this XML documentation, it is keeping track of a little bit more for me automatically. So I'm going to say get dimension prompts the user for a side length in feet and then in inches. So I think that documentation is good for that module. I should have done that as I was there, huh? Sometimes I do it that way. You guys will do better. Now, I need to go ahead and create this next module that we're talking about where we're going to prompt the user for price. So I'm going to come to my closing curly brackets for my dimension, put in a couple of blank lines so that I am on track, and I'm going to create another method. This one again is a static method. It's going to return a double, and it's going to be called GetPrice. It does not expect any input to be supplied to it, no parameters, so my opening and closing parentheses are blank. I'm going to go ahead and put my opening and closing curly brackets, and in the GetPrice I'm going to have a string called input value. Again, this is going to be a local variable, so I'll put a comment there. Declare method local variables. So that input value is going to be, again, whatever my user types. I'm going to have a double that I'm going to refer to as price within this method. I have a write statement. It's going to be enter the price per space, and then I'm going to add more to it. Oops, I went somewhere. There it is. Enter the price per, and then on the next line I'm going to put square yard colon and space. Close my statement with a semicolon, and now my next line of code is going to read the user's input, and it's going to place that into input value. So input value equals whatever you read from that line that the user typed in. All right, so we're reading it, putting it in input value, which is a string. So whatever weird things the user typed, we'll be able to handle. Now we're going to move that into price, and to move it into price, which is a numeric field, we have to use our parse, and we're going to do a double dot parse because this is a double, our price, and we want input value to be parsed as a double and placed into price. Once we're done, we're ready to return price to our calling routine. So not a lot going on here. We just prompt the user for the price and we return it back to the calling routine. So back up in my main, I want to change things to use my new method. In my GetPrice method, let's go ahead and document the ends of GetPrice. And at the beginning, put our 3 slashes to document our method. GetPrice prompts the user for the carpet price. Okay, let's implement that one. Go back to our main, because our main routine, of course, is where everything's happening. Now, I am going to be able to get rid of some of these variable declarations in my main. Notice that we're getting some with green underlines, because as we change things, we're using different variables. We're not necessarily needing those. I know for sure I can get rid of all of these, right? Because these were set in our width and length, and now we're prompting our user for that. So we don't need these static variables that we're not going to be changing because we're prompting our user. All right. So in my main, here's where I'm displaying my instructions. Now I'm calling my GetToMention method to get the length. Then I'm calling it again to get the width. I'm going to go ahead and add in a call to our new GetPrice method. And I want to put that price into our variable price per square yard. And it's mad at me because that's going to be a new variable for me. So I'm going to put the output of GetPrice into that new variable. So I better declare it. Remember, GetPrice is going to give me a double, so this price per square yard needs to be a double. So I'll come up here, and right here where I have carpet price, I'm going to press enter and add price per square yard. And here in a minute I won't need that carpet price anymore because we'll be getting rid of that. Right down here where I have carpet price set to $27.95, I don't need that anymore. But here where I'm calculating the price, I better change it to use my new price per square yard. Same thing. Down a little bit with my pile calculation. I'm going to remove completely this carpet price variable. I don't need it anymore. And right here, I'm going to use my new price per square yard variable. Now, notice that I don't have a separate price now for my cost of Berber or my cost of pile. So I don't really think I need to have all this stuff down here about these different types of carpet. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of these 3 lines. Calculate the cost of pile, doing the calculation, and the right line. So now I really have calculate the cost of carpet, and right now it's still going to display out that it's the best carpet, which is fine, but I'm going to go ahead and run this so that we can test it and make sure we don't have anything messed up. I see some yellow, so I'll save all. I'm going to run it. Okay, I get my prompts for the length in feet: 12 feet, 4 inches, width 14 feet, 7 inches, price per square yard, I'll make it 14, and it says my total price for Berber is going to be $279.78. I'd have to do some calculations to make sure that that's correct. I'm going to pause here, make sure you've got everything the way you want it, and I'll be back and we'll finish up these modifications to our carpet calculator app. Thank you.